The Colts had just about as eventful of a day as a team could have without actually stepping foot on a field, and we're going to tell you all about it on today's episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Jake Arthur, joined as always by Zach Hicks, and you know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com, of course. So, Zach, what'd you find yourself getting into today, man?
Well, I didn't have as busy a day as you did with everything going on with the Colts, but I think I got into the same stuff that everybody else did. It was kind of an insane day.
Yeah, absolutely insane is one way to put it. So the Colts got their day started by firing offensive coordinator Marcus Brady, which of course raised plenty of eyebrows, which we'll get into. And then they ended it by trading running back Nyheim Hines, which wasn't really a surprise given the last 24 hours, but still a bit of a surprise overall nonetheless. We're going to dissect all of that and more, and then we'll look into what all of it means for the Colts moving forward. So starting out, of course, with the biggest news, Nyheim Hines gets traded to the Buffalo Bills. In exchange, the Colts receive running back Zack Moss, who is, he's the third down back in his own right out of Buffalo as well, kind of. But the Colts also get a conditional 2023 sixth-round pick out of it. That can become a fifth-round pick. We're assuming if playing time incentives are hit and things like that. The Colts now have 8 picks in this next draft. A first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then 2 sevenths. So they're represented in every round so far. So the reload, we won't call it a rebuild, the reload for next offseason has some ammo to it. Nyheim Hines, his contract runs through 2024. It has no guaranteed money left after this year's $3.3 million, and it's got $12.3 million total remaining between now and the end of 2024. Moss is a whole lot cheaper. He is signed just through next season, and he has no more dead money or guarantees remaining from what I could see. The total remaining on his deal left is $1.7 million. So, Zach, Nyheim, that's been our guy for the whole time. I put out a tweet today. He's probably been my favorite guy to talk to in the locker room since he came into the league in 2018. Big time team leader. So, what do you think about his departure?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like we should start this segment by just talking about Nyheim Hines and not even just what he was doing on the field. Because, look, I think we can all kind of agree, even if you're not the biggest Nyheim Hines fan, he just wasn't utilized the way that he could have been utilized. Like, even if you just think he's a terrible running back and he can't run the ball very well, he should have been used more in the passing game. He should have been used more at wide receiver, more in the slot, more on gadget plays. They have done a little bit with it over the years, but it just never got to the point where he could have been really effective. And I think in Buffalo, he's going to be able to do a lot of that. But speaking away from the field right now, just taking it away from the field, Nyheim Hines, man, one of my favorite players on this entire team. I'm not like you. I haven't been blessed enough to talk to every single Colts player or a lot of Colts players like in that locker room setting, but I have interviewed a couple Colts players, and Nyheim Hines is one guy that I did like a film interview with a couple years ago, and just one heck of a guy, just a really down to earth guy, really pleasant to talk to. Honestly, I think one of the nicest human beings I've ever talked to. Like, he saw a picture of my like engagement pictures or whatever with my now wife, and wished us many blessings on our future marriage and our long life together. And since that day, he's been my wife's favorite player. My wife was a little bummed when I said that he got traded. So yeah, it's tough, man. Nyheim Hines, that's a glue guy. When you talk glue guys in a locker room, like, this is not even just on the field, because again, third down running back, a guy who maybe sees 20, 30, maybe 40% of the snaps. But in that locker room, he is a glue guy. Your glue guys with this team under Frank Reich have been like him, Zaire Franklin, Shaquille Leonard, like those guys, the vocal guys that the players in that locker room look up to. and they go to, and they're kind of like that big brother to everybody in the locker room. Nyheim Hines has been that guy since day one. The second that he stepped in that locker room, even as a rookie in 2018, he's been a glue guy in that locker room. I know you can attest to that more than I can, Jake, because you've been so much closer to the team than I have. But you could just see in the way guys talk about him. Like, it's never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing about his personality, about his work ethic, about what he is in that locker room. So, when we got the news from Adam Schefter there on ESPN that he requested this trade, and the Colts granted it and sent him to Buffalo. That's a tough blow to a locker room. Like, even if you sit down with all the guys and say, like, look, I requested this and I wanted to move on to Buffalo, that's a tough loss, man, especially because, like, where do you sit as a locker room, and there's a lot of players in that locker room, when one of your leaders, one of your vocal guys, one of the guys you've looked up to for years says, hey, I requested out, like, that's a tough blow. So I think the Colts are going to feel this trade on the field. I think they're going to feel this trade off the field. And, you and I were talking before we recorded, like, that just felt like a guy who was kind of untouchable because of who he was in that locker room. Just a huge face of that locker room since 2018. And for him to kind of request a trade and get granted that trade, that's insane. Like, if you told me before the year that Nyheim Hines would not be on the Colts at the end of the season, I would think that's absolutely insane. But it's the nature of where we are with this 2022 Colts team, and you have to move on from it. But yeah, man, Nyheim Hines before the season, I would have said, is like a core glue guy, and now he's in Buffalo for table scraps.
Yeah, and initially I said, I don't disagree with him getting traded or anything like that. This is before we knew a little more of the details and everything. I'm not a big fan of the compensation. For my money, Zack Moss is just about a wash with Deion Jackson. Like, Deion Jackson's not great, but, like, they could do some of the same things. Zack Moss is probably a better pass protector. But, like, to me, the differences are just kind of negligible. Like, I'd be totally fine with Jackson remaining the next man behind Jonathan Taylor throughout the season.
Right.
So, and a 6th rounder being the other part of it, I just thought they could probably get more. But it's almost like the Matt Ryan Atlanta thing. Atlanta would have loved to get more for dealing Matt Ryan, but by his request and the certain destination, you just kind of give the player, what they're asking for. So I get that. As far as on the field goes, and you're exactly right with everything you said off the field. It's going to be weird stepping into a locker room without him in it. It just, again, he seemed untouchable, very much a leader in there. It's going to be weird. But as far as on the field goes, this is going to be interesting. They, throughout his entire career, it wasn't just this year. We always had times where we're like, why are they not using him enough? He'd go off for... He'd go off for 2 insane games in a row, and then it's like he just was barely used for 4 or 5 straight games after that. And, they'll say, that's just not what the game plan was, this or that. But it's like, okay, tough. He's one of your best playmakers. You just have to find a way to get him involved every week. And so I don't blame him if he wanted to go somewhere else. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this is, again, this is just a tough trade. It's a tough trade. And I get it. Again, the table scraps coming back are because when a player requests a trade and he has that kind of contract and he's not a starting running back, what are you really going to get back for him? There's not really a market for the 12th highest paid running back who's maybe going to see the field 30% of the time. But he felt like a glue guy on this team. Maybe it's a turning of page now with the Frank Reich and Chris Ballard era, and who knows what is on the other page here, but it definitely felt like, this feels like if they would have let Zaire Franklin leave this offseason or something like that. Like, it feels like a similar thing where maybe on the field it's not as huge, but in that locker room, that's tough. That's a tough one. But quick thoughts on Zack Moss. Really good pass protector, kind of a bigger bruising back, decent hands, but I think he's more of a Jordan Wilkins type. He's a guy who's going to play some special teams. Like, in special teams, I mean, like, the protector on punt team or something like that, not like a gunner or anything like that. He'll play like a little bit of that. He's a good pass blocker, decent pass catcher. It's been okay running the ball, but nothing special. Yeah, it's just like a Jordan Wilkins type, so it's nothing huge coming back. But yeah, it's done. At least we had time to prepare. We had a whole day to prepare with Stephen Holder and Zach Kiefer kind of putting the news out there that Nyheim Hines would likely to be traded. But yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, again, I can only imagine what that locker room's thinking right now, because just us as reporters and writers and stuff like that who've covered the team, and you who's been in that locker room, it's like that presence being gone is insane. Like, imagine what that locker room is thinking right now.
Yeah, I can't wait to get in there tomorrow and find out all about it, because there's a lot of stuff we need some more context on. We need to find out more details on. But before we get into that and the next big news story of the day, did you guys know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system, so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. I love it, first of all, because I do have a family to protect and I can't always be there. But I also have a dream of one day catching a porch pirate in the act, and I think that's something that Simply Safe might be able to help me out with. Whether it's being able to monitor things from my home, or their monitoring team giving a heads up if a natural disaster were to smoke my house, they've got my back. In an emergency, their 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify that a threat is real, so that you can get a priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, Zach. So obviously the Colts had a really big news story to start the day, and it gets shuffled down to topic number 2 because they had to top themselves.
Right.
So this one, I don't know. If you're like me, this one is even a bigger head scratcher. So the Colts fire offensive coordinator Marcus Brady, and immediately people are like, hey, Frank Reich, wait a second, man. That's pretty much you. You're the one out there calling plays, this and that. So I haven't heard much detail on what Marcus Brady provided, weekly, but the last we all heard in the media was about Nick Sirianni, very heavily involved in game planning throughout the week, helping with things schematically, things like that. Basically, Frank Reich's right-hand man,
right,
as an offensive mind, essentially.
Right.
If you're not gonna call the plays, that's basically what your job is. So, Marcus Brady being fired mid-season seemed very suspect, very questionable, because Frank also released a statement that just didn't really give much detail either. Colts coordinators normally speak to the media on Tuesdays. Obviously, that was not going to happen this Tuesday, so they shuffled it to Thursday. Frank's going to take over offensive coordinator duties for the rest of the season. So, just for me at face value, it seemed like a panic move. Who knows where it's coming from? Is it coming from the top as a suggestion? Is there a difference in philosophy? Did Brady want out? Like, we need more context, because right now all there is to do is speculate.
Right. So a little bit of clarification from what I have been able to gather about just offensive coordinators who aren't play callers in the NFL and how a lot of this kind of stuff works. A lot that goes into being offensive coordinator is that game planning. It is the advanced scouting. It's, preparing for an upcoming opponent, because look, Frank Reich was the head coach. He is the head coach. He doesn't have time to be the advanced scout for the team. He doesn't have time to be the game planner for that opening script or for other scripts and stuff like that in the game. So that's where a guy like Marcus Brady comes in. And so in a way I can see the rationale, because the Colts have just been atrocious on their opening scripts this year. They've been atrocious early in games, and they kind of pick up later on in games once they're doing kind of their in-game scouting rather than their pre-game scouting. But the one thing I will say that kind of is funny to me is I think the last thing I would ever suggest with all the struggles the Colts have been having this year is put more responsibility on Frank Reich's plate. Throw more at Frank Reich. He looks overwhelmed as it is. He looks kind of in over his head as it is because he doesn't have quality assistants like he had early on in his tenure. A guy like Nick Sirianni, who was kind of like him in the film room and stuff like that. Like Frank Reich felt comfortable with Nick Sirianni because Nick Sirianni was going to see the same things that he could see. They were guys who had worked together for a long time. And that's where that comfort level and where that cohesion really worked. With Marcus Brady, it just never was there. And so I kind of understand making this move, but again, it does feel like a scapegoat. It does feel like a fall guy. I totally see where people are coming from with that because at the end of the day, Frank Reich's the one making the play calls. Yes, it might be Marcus Brady saying like, look, attack the defense this way. And then Frank Reich calls that play and it doesn't work. And it's like, look, Brady, your game plan was not the way that, we expected. But again, it just does feel like kind of deflecting the blame a little bit. Now, something I said earlier on social media is like, look, if Frank Reich is kind of a lame duck coach and he's gone at the end of the year, this firing is just getting ahead of the curve. It's really nothing notable. But, you can't help but thinking right now it's kind of a scapegoat, even though there is some evidence for it. Again, this Colts offense has been putrid. But yeah, I mean, the failures on offense go a lot further than just Marcus Brady. Even if it was just Marcus Brady doing that opening script, because it's not like they're only a bad offense in the first quarter. They're bad pretty much the whole game. So, it's a weird timing thing, and it's kind of a weird look. But I do get it in some ways. But yeah, you can't help the optics of it. It does look very scapegoat, very fall guy. But I think you have some stats here to talk about the Colts offense that, yeah, this Colts offense hasn't been good, and he is the offensive coordinator, so I get it in some ways. It's weird. It's a weird one.
Yeah, like if I was someone who paid attention to a different team, then on face value, this makes sense. The Colts offense currently ranks 15th on third downs. They're 18th overall, 30th in scoring. But then again, you start to think, Frank's the play caller. And then all of us here, we're like, hey, wait a minute. There's another offensive coach leading a unit that has done poorly and kind of leads to trickle down of the rest of the offense failing, and that's the offensive line. Chris Strasser's been here since 2019. His unit these guys are extremely expensive. You got Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith. Everyone seems to be underperforming somehow. You've been with these guys multiple years now. The Colts ranked 29th in rushing despite having the league's reigning rushing champion, which is unheard of. And they are tied for 29th in sacks allowed with 26. Pro Football Focus ranks the Colts as 28th out of 32 in pass blocking and 30th in run blocking. So no matter how you look at it, it's really not great. And a lot of people are asking this today is, why is Brady taking the fall for this when, Frank is calling the plays and Chris Strasser's unit has been atrocious despite this being like his third or fourth year here? Again, I think there's a lot of things going on in there we just don't know, which is why we're going to need more context. I know Frank doesn't really like to pull the curtain back much, but I think we're going to need to know more details, or this is just going to kind of, it's people, and we're included in this, it's hard not to just start assuming things. But man, it's curious for sure.
Yeah, again, me just putting some rationale behind it. I'm not saying this is what I think. It's just, this is what could be happening behind the scenes. The advanced scouting just hasn't been there. The game plans just haven't been there. And that's a lot of what Marcus Brady's doing as an offensive coordinator to kind of take some of that pressure off of Frank Reich as the head coach and play caller. And their opening scripts have been terrible. They haven't scored on a first drive. They have more 3-and-outs than positive drives to start games this year, and also to start halves and stuff like that. Given, again, their offense has been bad all game long, but it has been notably worse in the first quarter than it has been in the fourth quarter, for instance, where the in-game scouting is more important than the pre-game scouting. So I could see Marcus Brady being the fall guy for that, because that is something that kind of falls under his jurisdiction. And then the thing with Chris Strasser, just to hit on this real quick, I think more of an issue with the Chris Strasser stuff is you need someone to take over coaching that offensive line. And I don't think they have anybody in organization that they kind of trust taking over that. Like,
it would probably have to go to Clayton Adams, or Kevin Mawai would have to be the two options.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how much they trust that. So for as bad as you might think Chris Strasser is, they might think that they have worse options in-house. Whereas, with Marcus Brady, they could say, look, Frank has been an offensive coordinator before. We'll just have him take more on his plate as maybe the potential lame duck coach. So I think that's some rationale behind it. But again, like you said, it'd be nice if they pulled back the curtain just a little bit. I don't even want them to just go up there and start throwing, shots at Marcus Brady, because that's not productive whatsoever. But yeah, this is a couple weeks in a row now of just crazy moves. Benching your quarterback that you traded a third-round pick for, a former MVP, firing your offense coordinator, trading away your locker room guy. It's just a lot of just throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it sticks, and hopefully it turns the season around, where it's kind of coming off more like Hail Marys at this point than anything else, that are just really low percentage to actually work. So I don't know, but we're going to get to on our next segment here, guys. We're going to talk about kind of the future of this team and what we think about the Colts going forward. But first, I want to talk to you guys about Prize Picks. Prize Picks has Sam Ehlinger as at more or less than 210.5 passing yards and Jonathan Taylor at 76.5 rushing yards this week in New England. Now, I'm pretty tempted to go ahead and place a couple of these picks, but I want to make sure that, I want to see what happens without Nyheim Hines first. So I don't know. You guys can pick those at your own at your own pleasure there. Regardless of who I pick, though, Prize Picks makes it crazy easy to earn some cash by just throwing caution into the wind and making these picks on their mobile app. I love how quick and easy it is, guys. You just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch, which is key right now with the World Series and the new NBA season and the new NHL season. I mean, come on, guys. We all love NHL. That's my jam right there. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. All right, Jake. Now the bombastic, hot takey. Look. I have fun on social media. I have a lot of fun on social media. It's not serious. Twitter is a goofball place. So I throw a lot of memes and say crazy stuff on there. But pulling it back, scaling back, being serious for a moment, I have no clue the direction of this Colts team right now. I think they are in a really dangerous and weird spot where they made that disastrous trade for Carson Wentz. And they tried to rectify it by just saying, oh, all we need to do is get Matt Ryan, go back to the Phillip Rivers season, and it'll fix everything. And what we've seen is it's compounded into something worse. And now you have a potential lame duck coach, a potential lame duck GM, with a roster that probably needs, I'm not even going to say they need to be blown up, but you probably need a retooling. You need to sell off some guys that are not going to be here for the next year or two. I'm not saying you need to do it at the trade deadline, but maybe in the offseason. You need to make some moves, at some point in the near future. And kind of refresh this roster a little bit, because it's this roster, again, it's like a stain right now. It's just very mediocre, and you have a lot of things kind of blowing up in your face right now. Again, benching a former MVP quarterback that you just traded for after 7 weeks is not normal. Firing your offensive coordinator, right after making that bench is not normal. Trading away a locker room guy because he's requesting a trade halfway through the season is not normal for good teams. This is something that you see in bad teams. But I do think they're in this really weird limbo stage right now where you have a GM and a head coach that want to keep their job and want to keep winning, but you kind of have a team and a locker room that probably isn't capable of that right now. It's a really weird limbo spot. And for me, I don't know what the future of the Colts are right now. Do they even move on from these two after the season? We've seen Jim Irsay have commitment to coaches and GMs for a little bit longer than their expiration date for a while now. We saw that with Pagano and Grigson. This isn't me just coming on here and being hot takey and saying fire Ballard right now, fire Frank Reich right now, blow it up, get rid of everybody. But what is this team going forward? They're not a good team, but they're not like a train wreck team. They have talent. They have young players that are interesting and fun. They have star power, DeForest Buckner, Shaquille Leonard. But what is this team? I just don't know. I can't get a feel on what this team is. And I think the disasters at quarterback these last 2 seasons just kind of shown that right in our face. Like, what is this team? What are they trying to accomplish? And I just don't see any vision for this team going forward.
Yeah, it's this team feels like uncharted territory for what we've seen from Ballard and Reich. They're just kind of doing uncharacteristic things that we're just not used to seeing. Like, we wouldn't have thought that. And I'll say this: we didn't necessarily disagree with switching quarterbacks, but we wouldn't have thought they would have done that. At least not that early, switching from Matt Ryan after 7 weeks. What was it? And then firing the offensive coordinator the week after. This is just new territory that we're not used to from them. And now I have no idea what an offseason looks like if these guys are still here. What do they try to accomplish? Because something I always find myself going back to, and I don't want to pin a guy to this like years later, but at Chris Ballard's introductory press conference, he said we're never going to make it about just one guy, referencing Andrew Luck. And it's like, that's great. They have built a well-rounded roster that's been able to stay alive and tread water without a marquee quarterback. But it very clearly cannot take the next step without one.
Right.
So they're going to be in a new boat for a quarterback yet again. So far, the track record's not great. Whether it's a veteran or a young guy, like, so far they just haven't found the guy. I think that does have to be priority number one after this season. Assuming this season isn't going to just totally flip and everything is going to do some 180 and it's going to look totally different. Right. I think that's a little unrealistic. But yeah, I don't know whether to have confidence in them, because this year has damaged my confidence in them. I used to be very confident in what they would do and the direction they were going. I understood why they were doing things, even if I didn't agree with the specific moves themselves. But dude, I have no idea what this looks like, what they're going to do. Don't know.
Yeah. And let me level with you guys. All you guys listening, all you guys watching. Yes, I know. I've seen the comments. I see the comments where it's like, you guys are doomers. You guys joke around about the team being bad when they're not that bad. So let me be straight up. This team is not the worst team in football. It's not. It's not that bad. However, there's no clear direction for this roster going forward, this team going forward. You guys can be the most optimistic fans ever, saying, oh, look at the last 2 years, how we always turned it around after a bad start. But look at this team compared to those teams. Their wins are them barely squeaking by on last-second touchdowns or last-second field goals. The years before, when they were losing games early, they were losing because they had injuries, or they were losing because they made mistakes in games that they were leading. This one, they're not even coming close to winning these games, and then they're pulling out some magic at the end. That's not sustainable. This team is not a great team. And we are seeing it in press conferences. We're seeing it throughout the week that this team is just, we're seeing really snarky comments from players and stuff. We're seeing it's a very different feel with this team compared to the last couple of teams.
I can say without a doubt this is different.
Right. And don't get me wrong. I think that there is potential with this roster. I love Alec Pierce. I love Michael Pittman Jr. I love Jonathan Taylor when he's healthy. Shaquille Leonard, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart. Like, these are legit players, really good players, and also really good young players too. You have some young guys like Alec Pierce. Jelani Woods looks good. Sam Ehlinger looks like he could be a really good backup going forward. I don't know. I don't know. Like, he could even be more than that. Who knows? But there's just no cohesion between the top and the bottom of this organization and where this team wants to go and where this team can be. And you're seeing it just trickle down to Hail Mary throws at firing an offensive coordinator, benching a former MVP quarterback that you just traded for, trading away Nyheim Hines. Like, it's just, this team doesn't know what it wants to be. And I just don't know what they're going to be after this season. So again, I'm not trying to be all doomer. I'm not trying to say that they're going to be, the Washington Commanders and not make the playoffs for 20 straight years or something, or, not get past not win a playoff game in 20 years. I'm not saying it's going to be anything like that, but like, this team right now, they were treading water with Ballard and Reich, and they were doing well for what they were doing, for a team that was coming back from a crazy retirement that nobody bounces back from. They were still treading water after that. But it's kind of running out of time right now. And we're seeing it kind of all fall apart and all crumble in their faces. And you see this at the end of all regimes in the NFL. I think an example I always throw out there is Mike Zimmer's time with the Vikings. Very, very good coach. And Rick Spielman was a good GM, but it just didn't work. And it fell apart at the end. We're kind of seeing that with the Indianapolis Colts right now. So I don't know. I'm not saying fire everybody right now. I'm not saying it's the worst team in football, but there's no direction for this team right now. You're seeing the locker room is in a very different place than what it was in years past. And I don't really know what the future holds for this Colts team. That's just me leveling with you guys and being straight up. Like, I'm not trying to be doomer or upset or anything like that. It's just like, man, I don't know what there is to be excited about outside of a couple of young players that are showing out.
Yeah, we don't think the destination is some long drawn out purgatory. Like,
right.
This is still a mediocre team that the arrow can go up anytime. Like,
right.
They can fix things in an off season. It's not like, I mean, they can build things in a better direction in an off season. But yeah, and I think the reason we've had to kind of take this tone lately is because if you've been with us since July when we started the show, expectations were high. Like, right. Internally, externally, we had high expectations, and it's just disappointing with how things have gone. And so we're gonna shoot it to you straight how we feel about things. We're not gonna try and sugarcoat things and make things sound fake optimistic. And our doubts aren't manufactured either. Like, we want to tell you guys how we're feeling, and honestly, we wouldn't put a lot of this out there if it's not the conversations we're having with fans every single day.
Right. Yeah, last thing I'll say about this, and then I know we got to close this out because we're going a little long, but like, look, not all hope is lost, but like, we came into the season expecting something different than what we'd seen the last couple of years, and we did get something very different. It's just not in the way that we expected. Instead of this being this upward climb and a different year from last year where they're going to take that next step with a veteran quarterback, it's kind of a big old decline. And it's not a good trend for a coach that's been here for this is his 5th year, and a GM who's been here for this is his 6th year. Like, it's not good. So yeah, we're trying to be straight with you guys. We're not trying to make you guys tune in to hate listens every time, but like, I don't know what else to say about this team right now. It's a weird place.
Yeah, no, we want things to look good as well. But on that note, we'll wrap this one up. Stay tuned with us this week. We're going to cross over with Locked On Patriots to find out a little bit more about Bill Belichick's group, because believe it or not, there is a game to play this week. All this noise aside, the Colts do have a game on Sunday. And we're also going to do our own digging and give you guys our predictions on the game from there.
Definitely. Make sure you guys are following us on social media at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Locked On Colts, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to our show on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys tomorrow.